So the iPhone 7 is already hissing at people, which isn't as bad as your phone exploding, which is what's happening to the batteries on some Samsungs, and Apple has still refused to acknowledge their touch disease issue. Hey, it's Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair, and today is September 19th, 2016, and here's what's going on in the world of wireless. Right now, the iPhone 7 is probably at the top of everyone's list for news related to wireless, and here's the thing that comes up a lot for me. You know, when a new phone comes out, people immediately ask me if I'm going to buy the new X, whatever it happens to be, whatever the flagship is anyways, and it's funny that I got to tell you, I have always joked about waiting for the iPhone 7. Ever since the 2G was out, people would ask me, am I going to get the 3G? Am I going to get the 3GS, the 4, etc.? And, you know, I kind of jokingly said I'm going to wait until the iPhone 7 comes out because that's my lucky number. I was born on the 7th and so forth. But really, the main reason that I never bought an iPhone is because the screens were simply too small for me. I was an old school, hold on to the physical keyboard as long as I could, and then when we finally got to touchscreens, I found it very frustrating. Even though damn you autocorrect is entertaining to a certain extent, after a while you just get tired of not being able to input what you're trying to send to somebody and you have to keep hitting back and erase your messages. So I figured I'd wait until something bigger came out. Now, I did break down and buy an iPhone 6 when these became available because they finally made what is, in my opinion, a screen that is built for adult-sized hands. It's not that frustrating. It's much easier to text on this than any of the previous generations, including the iPhone 5, which I still felt was just kind of an awkward-sized screen. I never understood why they stretched everything up. You know, if you want to access something on the phone, your thumb only goes so far. So when you have applications built in, and this isn't just Apple, there are apps that have the back button up at the top left corner. I don't know who can reach that with one hand. It just doesn't make any sense. You think that developers would figure that out. But anyways, back to the 7. There are reports already of phones hissing at people. So apparently there's a sound coming from the back side. So this is on Mashable. They just kind of mentioned it. If you take a look at the Unbox Therapy guy's video, he does a demonstration where he actually records the sounds coming from the back of the phone so you can hear it hissing. What is that about? I mean, I just can't wait to see what's inside the phone that's going to be making noise. And one thing that I always caution people on and really blows my mind is that when people go out and get a brand new model, the first time the form factor is released, there are obviously going to be some problems. This has happened with just about every generation of iPhone. So personally, I will wait until they've gone through at least the first few months until they've sold through all of the initial release of that model. People have reported back with problems, and then they fix it usually in the coming months, and if not, at least when the 7S or whatever it's going to be called. And it's always funny how people say that because up until now, they have followed that numerical system, but every time a new iPhone is released, it's, well, the iPhone 6, if that's what it's called. Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that the next phone will probably be a 7S, and after that, an 8, but who knows? Maybe they'll change it up. Anything is possible. In addition to the hissing sound, what people are talking about is something with the home button. So basically, instead of a mechanical button that depresses when you push it, the iPhone 7 solid state home button does not move and operates instead using software, providing haptic feedback. So in other words, you need a capacitive surface such as your finger to touch the home button in order to activate it. Now, this is something that I also question the importance of, because if you have an iPhone, when you press the home button, what do you do from there? That does not involve using a capacitive surface to touch the screen, because you can't really operate anything on the screen without your finger or a special stylus that is designed to operate it that way. So I don't really see the issue with the home button not responding to a physical press, because if your finger cannot activate the home button, does it really matter? Because once the home button is activated, you can't do anything with the screen unless you have your finger up against it or something else like a stylus. So I really don't understand what the point is behind that particular argument. I will say, though, when it comes to the headphone jack, this is one that a lot of people are kind of siding against Apple on, surprisingly, because many loyal Apple customers will buy into just about anything that Apple says to do. So, and that's entirely fine. However, at this point, I have to just wonder, what is the deal with a company that pays $3 billion to purchase a headphone company, and 2 years later you cannot use those headphones without a special adapter on the device that they sell. Kind of interesting the way that that worked out. So obviously, when you get your phone, it's going to come with the capability of using wireless or an adapter for your headphones. But if you are to lose those wireless earbuds, it's going to set you back about $150 to buy another pair, unless you go with the third party, and I'm sure those will be flooding the market very soon. As someone who's been in the repair business for a long time, long before Apple started making any phones, a lot of my customers will ask me what type of phone I use. Now, this is usually while I'm performing a repair and we're just kind of having a casual conversation, and we talk about the problems with Apple and the problems with Samsung and the problems with everyone else, because all of these manufacturers do have their challenges. And ultimately the question will come up where they say, well, what kind of phone do you use? And my answer is usually not what they expect. Usually they're going for something that's going to be a clear cut, oh, I'm an Apple fan, or I'm an Android fan and therefore I use Samsung, or something like that. But really, my preference, for what it's worth, comes down to functionality. I do not care too much about most of the brand names and a lot of the things that they represent, but I do have a few things that I look for in a phone that is becoming increasingly difficult to find. So one thing that I definitely miss on this iPhone 6 is that we do not have any hands-free talk to text. I do not have that on my Android. Also, that was strictly a Windows thing. And once my Lumia 1020 just kind of self-destructed, I do not have that functionality anymore. So I know that you can use Siri and you can use Google in order to dictate, but how do you answer a text message without using your hands? And this was a cool thing about Windows. You put your Bluetooth on, you drive. If someone texts you, it speaks into your ear and allows you to hear the message, reply to it all the entire time, never taking your hands off the steering wheel. So I'm really surprised that nobody's built that into their operating system yet. This is a real issue for people on the road, because with all the people who are using their phones while they're driving, it has become a very dangerous place to be. So why can't we use our phones for texting, which is one of the most popular methods of communication nowadays? You should be able to do that without having to touch your phone. So hopefully someone buys that technology. I assume that there's some sort of copyright on it that Windows has, but it really should be made available to more operating systems. The other thing that I was really surprised about was the fact that there was no infrared built into the iPhone 6. Doesn't look like the iPhone 7 has it either. And there's also no NFC. Now, for me, I was able to overcome that problem. I bought a special adapter. You plug it into the bottom of the phone, and now I do have wireless charging on my iPhone, which is, again, another thing that I think that most manufacturers should offer by now. Samsung has it in a lot of their phones, and I'm really surprised that Apple doesn't. However, the big challenge for them, obviously, is going to be having a metal back on the phone, because that wireless charging will not pass through the type of alloy that's on the back of this. So there's probably a way to make that work, and hopefully that will be released in the future at some point. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on Apple. Obviously, Samsung is having their share of issues, especially as of late with exploding batteries. So apparently Samsung will be switching suppliers. They have been up until now using their own affiliate, Samsung SDI, for batteries, and they'll be switching to another supplier, ATL, who apparently is the supplier for iPhones. And this is just insanity for someone to have their phone exploding while it's charging. I mean, really scary. You can burn down your house, right? Now, what gets me, though, is that phone batteries have been exploding and bursting into flames for quite some time. I can remember back in, I want to say it was about 2012, when I made a video showing that the 3GS battery will expand over time when it gets old, changes temperature suddenly, and so forth. But I was very impressed at that time that the battery did not actually explode. All of the gases that were released caused it to expand, but it never caught on fire and it never blew up, and as far as I know, never released any toxic gases. However, it looks like Samsung is having a real challenge with that right now. But I do want to point out that it is not only Samsung. It just seems that this particular model that they released is plagued with that problem. They've had many cases of batteries exploding, but it is not new to cell phones. Back in August, there was a bike rider in Sydney who ended up with third-degree burns after his iPhone exploded while he was riding his bicycle. So again, this is something that has been happening for a while. About a year or two back, there was someone else who was sleeping with their phone under their pillow in bed. I don't know. And it exploded under the pillow. So this is really scary stuff because we're all walking around with what could be potentially ticking time bombs in our pockets. That's insane. So, by all means, if you own a Galaxy Note 7, contact Samsung. First of all, power it down. Do not attempt to charge it. Contact Samsung and get in on this swap out program. I don't know how you're going to replace that potentially dangerous phone, though. Do you send it in through the mail? I'm pretty sure they have laws against that. In any case, be sure to contact Samsung. They do have an exchange program set up where you can get a replacement device. Now, when something like this comes up, I like to go and take a look at what people are commenting on exactly. And this is one that had not even crossed my mind. I went to Reddit, and one of the top comments here from a few days ago, extra concerning is that people are using these for Gear VR, so it's possible that it would explode on your face. I mean, I'm not even sure what's worse. Do you want your phone's battery to explode while you're carrying it in your pocket or while you're holding it just a few inches from your face? I'm going to say that's probably going to be a lot more dangerous. But yeah, really scary stuff. Samsung has got some issues to deal with, and hopefully this is something that gets cleared up. And really what we need to have is some sort of testing standard. I mean, it's a surprise that these phones got released with this issue going on. Obviously somebody tried to cut some corners or tried to rush something into production, and that seems to be the opinion of a lot of people on the internet, for whatever that's worth, is that Samsung saw an opportunity because iPhone sales were kind of sliding a bit, and they decided to get this product out as soon as possible and may have failed to do sufficient testing beforehand. Now, the best thing to do with your Galaxy Note 7, of course, would be to turn it off and remove the battery. But since everyone's building their batteries into the phone, that's not really an option anymore. So there was a battery on a Delta flight from Norfolk, and apparently this was not even a battery in the phone. This was a spare battery that a customer had packed with them, and all of a sudden the battery explodes and a fire starts on a plane. This is just crazy. Fortunately, no one was hurt. They were able to put the fire out, but a battery, and no one's really confirmed what type of battery this was as far as what phone it came from yet, but the fact that a battery could explode in the plane is obviously a reason for concern. So, the missing headphone jack thing, I guess it really depends on the person. Myself, I don't use wired headphones. I haven't for quite some time. I always thought that Bluetooth was just an amazing technology, but I don't want to take away from the people who are not happy about this feature. In fact, I'd love to hear from you and kind of to get an idea of how many are really out there, because every forum that I read about the headphone jacks on, you hear the people who are upset about it speaking the loudest. And of course, there'll be one or two people in there saying, well, wireless is the future, get used to it, this is what it's going to be. But I think that to kind of pull the rug out from under their customers, Apple is releasing a phone that does not work with the accessories that they had in the past, which is not the first time they've done that. But a lot of people have bought entire cars with docks that are built in for their iPhones, which are not going to work exactly the same anymore. I don't know, I'm sure you can use some sort of adapter to bypass that, but for most people, I think it's a negative in the overall perception of what Apple is doing for their customers. Now, there were a couple drop test videos as soon as the iPhone 7 was released. I watched two of them, and surprisingly, one made the phone look like it was practically indestructible, and on the other one, the second drop, well, basically the first drop where they dropped the screen face down on the concrete, everything immediately shattered. So how durable is this phone? Time will tell. I'm sure that, again, being in the repair business, we'll find out right away. I've already spoke to a couple people who have had customers come in looking to get their iPhone 7 screen replaced. I mean, 2 days after it was released. So yeah, it looks like there's going to continue to be a demand for screen replacement. Now, the interesting thing about that is that Apple has silently increased their rate of repair for iPhone 5 and 6 series. So while there used to be a $109 flat rate of repair to get your screen repaired at Apple, they have now increased that price to $129, and the iPhone 6s is staying at $129 where it was before. Now, I assume this is to simplify pricing, but it's very interesting that they said nothing about this price increase anywhere unless you go to their website and you happen to read it, in addition to the fact that they really have not acknowledged that the touch disease issue is not going away. So if you're not familiar with this already, there is a problem with the iPhone 6 series, in particular the iPhone 6 Plus, and what's going on is that these phones, as we know, are quite flexible, and they've improved this design in the 6S and 6S Plus releases. But for the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, they are susceptible to bending because, long story short, the frame is not reinforced, so you've got a pretty bendable phone there. Well, what happens when this phone bends is that if you don't break the screen, and even if you are able to straighten the frame out, at the same time the phone is bending, you are flexing the PCB that is built inside of the phone. There's basically a circuit board that is just like the inside of a computer, and that board is not built to be flexed. And when it does start flexing, the connections of the components that sit against that board begin to crack, and you end up with an intermittent problem where you may or may not have touch functionality. And one of the telltale signs of this problem is a white line that goes right across the top of your phone. So if you own an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus and you're seeing this kind of problem develop, I would urge you to contact Apple, let them know about it. Hopefully they will offer you a solution. Don't be surprised if they act like this is not an ongoing thing, but it absolutely is. And in fact, it is the opinion of many professionals in this industry that if you own an iPhone 6 Plus, it is only a matter of time before your touchscreen doesn't work. If you want to get a look at touch disease being fixed by a third-party repair entity, you should take a look at this video right here. It shows you exactly what goes into replacing one of these chips after it has been damaged because of the touch disease. However, don't expect to hear much from Apple. In fact, a few months ago, there were several people in the repair industry who went to the Apple forums to talk about Error 53. If you're not aware of this, this was an issue that the iPhones had, which would basically brick your phone if you were to damage your fingerprint scanner. Not immediately, but when you performed an update or a restore on your phone, which is ridiculous because you could walk away from a repair thinking that your phone is working perfectly, and then you do an over-the-air update and suddenly it stops working. No matter how far an Apple store is from you, you are pretty much out of commission. So make a long story short, a lot of people went and started talking about this on an Apple discussion forum, and of course were shortly after banned, their comments deleted. Apple does not, these Apple forums, at least the moderators, do not like to hear anything that doesn't go along the lines of Apple is the answer to every problem that you have. So unfortunately, I don't think that this touch disease is something that you're going to hear much about from Apple, especially not on the Apple forums. That's probably a topic that could fill an entire video later on. I'll talk about that a little more. But I wish I had heard about everyone going on and trying to complain on the discussion forums. I made a few attempts several years ago regarding a password vulnerability, and of course I was immediately booted from the forum and they deleted my entire thread. So no matter what your intentions are, again, unless you say what is acceptable on that forum, you may not have a voice, and often you're going to be wasting your time. Too bad for Apple. So in New Jersey, you can now text 911 thanks to a collaboration among a number of public safety organizations. Why isn't this a thing everywhere? If you want to contact 911 and you're not able to make a voice call, you should absolutely be able to text, and hopefully this technology will be implemented soon everywhere. But again, if you're in New Jersey, it looks like you're in luck. You can text 911. In other news, we have a lawsuit against the FBI in order to find out who the FBI paid to get into the San Bernardino attacker's phone. If you don't remember this, there was a phone that was recovered for investigation by the FBI during right after the San Bernardino shootings, and they kind of went head-to-head with Apple, who basically refused to create a backdoor and hack their own technology so that the FBI could recover evidence from this phone. Apparently they went to a third party and were able to acquire that capability to the tune of $1.3 million. Now, the whole thing here is that the Associated Press, USA Today, and Vice Media are trying to force the FBI to reveal details from the deal that they made in order to get into this iPhone. The issues here, transparency, and also oversight for government spending. Obviously, they cannot invest $1.3 million every time they want to see what's in someone's phone. And at the same time, the manufacturer does not want to compromise the security of their device. So it will be interesting to see how this lawsuit turns out. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the section below. And thanks for watching.